Dear colleagues, dear guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's event. Today we are going to discuss artistic evolution, artistic work of two wonderful artists and the results of their interaction in the late 60s and 70s are put together in this amazing book, which is available through Rodovid Press. And I would like to start, everything is kind of in order. This event is the first event that I had the opportunity to organize as a director of the Danylo Struk program. And I would like to begin with land acknowledgement. We wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of St. Mike operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississauga of the Credit River. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. Now, the Danylo Struk program was established over 2 decades ago to celebrate and honor life and accomplishment of professor of the Department of Slavic Languages and Cultures at University of Toronto. And the program is dedicated to celebrating his memory as a scholar, writer, public intellectual, community leader. And in honor of Danylo Struk, the program organizes book events, lectures, meetings with writers. And it's the mandate that I'm eager to continue after my predecessor, who is here, whom I want to thank for years, decades of service and accomplishments, my colleague, Maxim Tarnavsky. Thank you, Maxime. It's going to be hard to follow in your footsteps. I want to. It is also a particularly auspicious, interesting moment that today, not only we are celebrating Danylo Struk, but we are celebrating the entire family. His sister, Natalka, who is a widely known on this continent and across painter, artist, and I guess writer, intellectual, considering some of your
No.
books.
No,
Okay,
right.
she can say no, all right.
Just letters, love letters.
Letters. That's literature. And we have a wonderful opportunity to talk to her about her work, about her encounters with Ukraine, in Ukraine, and about the book that is a result of one of those encounters. I would like to introduce our speakers and introduce myself very briefly. My name is Taras Koznarsky. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Slavic and East European Languages and Cultures here at the University of Toronto. And it is my pleasure and honor to introduce our main characters, our speakers, our heroes of this book. Natalia Khanenko-Friesen is a director of Canadian Institute of Ukrainian Studies at the University of Alberta. She's a cultural anthropologist and oral historian and a folklorist. By some more distant paths, who is not only a director of CIUS, but also a Husar chair in Ukrainian culture and ethnography at the University of Alberta. Natalia's scholarly interests span various research areas, from oral history, testimony research, to study of Ukrainian diaspora, personal correspondence, late socialist and post-Soviet Ukraine, and 20th century rural Ukraine, and a post-2022 testimony production in Ukraine, that is recording the eyewitnesses and testimony of survivors and those who are affected by the war. She authored several monographs, including The Other World, or Ethnicity in Action, Canadian Ukrainians at the End of the 20th Century, and Ukrainian Otherlands, Diaspora, Homeland, and Folk Imagination in the 20th Century, published by University of Wisconsin Press. She led several research and publication projects in oral history, including collections Orality and Literacy, Reflections Across Disciplines, and Reclaiming the Personal, Oral History in the Post-Socialist Europe. She is the founding editor of Canada's first multidisciplinary scholarly journal, Engaged Scholar Journal, Community Engaged Research, Teaching, and Learning. Since February 24, 2022, Natalia coordinates a number of scholarly initiatives in support of Ukraine on a global scale. She's a founder and co-director of the Summer Oral History Institute, Witnessing the War on Ukraine, the Crimean Tatar Studies as Indigenous Studies Initiative at University of Alberta, and other, including Translating Ukraine Summer Institute. She's recently received Ukraine's Order of Saint Olga, or Princess Olga. Lykhach, graduate from Kyiv National University with a degree in journalism and worked as a journalist for several years. And then she started what I'm tempted, or I wish I could say, an empire, Rodovid empire. Well, it's not yet, but it's a consortium of remarkable projects. She started with a journal, Rodovid, then in 91-92, continued as a publisher, editor of the Rodovid Press, and there will be a chance to talk a little bit more about this publishing house in Kyiv. She's also a founder and director of Rodovid Gallery in Kyiv since 2002, and she's an advisor to the Minister of Culture for several years. Her professional interests, scholarly interests, are in folk icons, traditional icons, created by village craftsmen and masters. She published on this matter, including icons from the land of Shevchenko in Rodovid Press in 2000. She curated numerous exhibitions that include The Beast of War, Naive Art from Ukraine in 2023 in St. Gallen, Switzerland, Through the Lens, Unbending Life at the Ukrainian Institute of Modern Art in Chicago in 2019-2020, and Ukrainian Avant-Garde, Non-Fashion Guide, 2018 Paris. As an executive director of Rodovid, Lidia created publishing projects that bring to light some of the most important elements of art history in Ukraine. They include more than 30 albums thus far, and in your invite there is a link to Rodovid Press where you can peruse their catalog and order. It's not cheap to deliver books from Ukraine, but they're certainly worth an effort. Among most interesting new publications by Rodovid is The Beast of War, Naive Art from Ukraine, an album Alexandra Exter, an album on Georgy Narbut, a book. These are not only albums, these are also books, collections of documents, memoirs by most important artists. For example, there's a book, Kazimir Malevich, Kyiv Period, that not only traces his stay in Kyiv, but also collects his most important writings published in the city. So, thank you for joining us today. And Lida will be very well equipped to talk about the history of the book. The book is quite amazing. We'll run some pages on the screen so you'll be able to appreciate the quality of the actual artwork, the letters, which are much more than letters, and the book itself. And now our artists' heroes. I'll begin with Ivan Ostafiychuk, who was born in Ivano-Frankivsk region to a farmer family. He studied art at Lviv Institute of Applied and Decorative Art, and in the 60s he dedicated even though it sounds like decorative applied art, this institution was home to several most interesting modernist artists in Lviv at the time. In the 60s, Ivan dedicates most of his energies to graphic art, textile, and ceramics. He received recognition for his graphic works, and they were exhibited across some republics in Soviet Union and abroad: Lithuania, Armenia, Poland, Germany, and Canada. And if you look at, it's not that easy to access some of his works online, so I did my best finding interesting examples. As you see, he is predominantly a graphic art, an artist that is focused, or we can say that line dominates his way of visualizing and producing artworks. Unlike, I would say, with Natalka, I think it's color more than line. But again, you might, okay, good. But we'll see some of the examples. And he produced several series of graphic works and illustrations to Ukrainian poetry, illustrations to Ukrainian folk songs. And as his art, his thinking became less and less conformist in the 70s, he found it very difficult under the surveillance of state apparatus. And in the 60s and 70s, the idea occurred that maybe there is a way of crossing the Iron Curtain and embarking on an artistic career in the free world. And that's also part of the book and part of the correspondence and part of the epistolary drama or performance or story that we'll learn today about. The attempt to leave Soviet Union did not work out in the 70s. He was only able to leave from Soviet Union to Croatia in 1987, and next year he managed to come to Canada. But once Ukraine gained independence, Ivan returned to Ukraine in 1992, where he continues to work. He is a respected, widely recognized artist, a recipient of Shevchenko National Award in Ukraine. And I just put together a couple of 2 slides with his works. And now Natalka Husar. Natalka Husar was born in New Jersey. Her parents and older brother Danylo came from DP camps after the war. But Natalka was already born in the United States. She studied art at Rutgers University and moved to Toronto soon after she graduated. From Wikipedia, Natalka is certainly featured on most encyclopedias of art, or most encyclopedias. I did not realize that she did have a stint as a flight attendant, and I guess that's probably partly becomes part of her persona that she explored to great effect in a series of her of her paintings from 2000. Her earliest exhibited works were ceramic examples, but very soon she embraced painting, and she is a prolific and acclaimed and a painter in demand in this country and beyond. She taught for over 2 decades at OCAD as a professor of painting. And in the center of her work is Ukraine, in various guises, in various manifestations. Ukraine as maintained, remembered, proliferated here by Ukrainian diaspora communities. Ukraine across the border over decades, that is Ukraine, Soviet Ukraine, with all the peculiar and not so peculiar manifestations of that Sovietness. Ukraine, non-conformist, creative Ukraine, with which Natalka was familiar before the collapse of Soviet Union, and finally the independent state and the process of transition and social change that Natalka witnessed and documented in a series of her artworks. My first encounter with Natalka's work was when I started my master's degree at the University of Alberta in 1993. And I studied with Professor Ilnitsky and Pilipyuk. So one day they had a reception at their home, and I went there and I saw this painting, Our Lady of Mississauga, and you know, I wasn't very interested in visual arts then. Now I'm much more keen to study visual art. So my first impression was, wow, that was it for then. Now, as we look at her over, and this is the website you want to visit in red. The website collects images of artworks of most prominent Canadian artists, and it's a perfect example to sort of get acquainted with Natalka's art through decades, with her artistic evolution. So it's difficult to choose favorites, but I put together a couple of examples, and I'll flick these PowerPoint slides. Natalka sent me today information that two of her works can be seen in Toronto, one at AGO, and this one at Gardner Museum of Ceramics, which several years ago had a larger exhibit of Natalka's ceramic art and a painting, or a couple of paintings, if I remember it correctly. So one of them is this TV dinner, Svet Večer, which immortalizes the Ukrainian folk ethnographic tradition of 12 vegetarian dishes on Christmas Eve. And Natalka puts a particular ironic twist on it, transforming it into a fast food package sort of kit for any family to celebrate Ukrainian Christmas Eve. On the right is one of her more recent paintings, Encounters with Ukraine, that quotes visually and aesthetically Ukrainian primitive art or peasant painting from the early 20th century that can still be found in some nooks and art stores, and of course in museums in Ukraine. This is from a series of paintings which Natalka called Painting with Dead Artists' Paints. She collected recycled old pigments from previous Soviet decades, which chemically remain quite strong. They're also chemically quite nasty with a lot of lead. And she used them to create her experiences, encounters with Ukraine in 2000s. And in this series, as you see on the right, she presents herself. She plays the role of both a flight attendant and a nurse. The comforter, the provider, and the provider of art, of food for thought, and also a rather sharp and caustic critic of mores and the current social order which she saw in Ukraine. Okay, now without further ado, I would like to ask our panelists about this project, Tango dla трьох, Tango for three people. I would say, if I understand it correctly, Natalia Khanenko-Friesen came up with the title, is that correct? Yes. With how to frame this very interesting body of work that will allow us to see pages from this book, photographs, and if you look at these pages, these are facsimiles of letters mostly written by Ivan Ostafiychuk. And if you look at them, you'll see that what is the genre of this work? It's not just a letter, it's an emotional connection, it's some kind of a epistolary poem. That's one dimension of letters. Another dimension of these letters is calligraphy. They're very distinct. They're very nicely shaped, hand-shaped letters that are a pleasure to an eye. And they're also artworks because they're full of illustrations. So each letter combines these three levels: the language of connection, the language of yes, the language of contact, of establishing a relationship, the calligraphic aspect, and the artistic graphic aspect that most of these letters feature. So I'm going to ask Natalia Khanenko-Friesen to tell us a little bit, and Lydia to tell us about the story of the book.
Tarase, thank you so much for this in-depth introduction to this amazing partnership between the three of us, or more than three of us, actually. It all begins with Ivan Ostafiychuk and Natalka, Ira Pasechnik, and so on and so forth. I'm not sure who is the right person to start reflecting on the history of how this book has come together. And that is very much an indication, my sort of hesitance is a little bit illustrative of how we all have collaborated.
І розказує Наталка Husar надзвичайно цю історію, звідки взялися ці листи. І я тільки хотіла сказати, що я сказала: Наталко, це треба друкувати, бо це велика і цікава, і надзвичайна така мистецька історія. І я думаю, що це така добра ідея. Ну, але сама історія, Наталко, хто розкаже?
Я думаю, що Наталка Husar мусить почати, якщо можна.
Let's do it in English, though.
Yes, and we're going to switch back to English.
Like Lida said, I collect everything. I'm a hoarder. I never throw out any piece of paper that's written. So when I showed her these letters, she said, let's print them. I gave them to her. She showed them to Natalia Friesen, and it's Natalia Friesen that came up with the concept that it wasn't really a correspondence between me and Ivan, it was a correspondence between me, Ivan, and the KGB. That's why there's Tango for Three. How they happened is I went to Ukraine in 1969. 1969, you know, do the math. I was young, I was 17 years old. And I didn't really head out to Ukraine. I headed out to Europe right after high school, like everybody, to Paris, London, Rome. And I was supposed to spend a month in Munich because my mother had a girlfriend there who had daughters my age. But in Munich, I got word that there's tours to Ukraine for students only for 10 days. You could go for like $500. And I phoned my parents from a Western Union office to say I needed money because I wanted to go to Ukraine, and my father said, no way, absolutely not. And then I phoned again the next day and I pleaded with Mama, and somehow I got money to go for 10 days to Ukraine. I was only 17, this was so exciting, you know, like I didn't know what to expect. And when I got there, thanks. I met some family that came to the Inturist hotel, and they were, they were from another world, you know. And I remember that the family that would come to the hotels, there would be police like shooing them away because they weren't allowed entrance into this hotel. They could only wait outside. And here they came with all these gifts, and they were like treated like rats. That's the first time I ever saw anything like that. Like, I was an American kid, you know, growing up in the land of plenty and freedom, and this was so. I think that image stayed with me for until I started painting, actually. Anyway, the family I met were, we had nothing in common, except we physically looked the same. You know, I had cousins who had the same nose like me, but we came from such different worlds. So that feeling of connection, but separation was formed in me, like, made a strong impression. And then somebody told me about, I wanted to be an artist. I wasn't an artist yet, but somebody told me that they could take me to, it was Volodymyr Struk. I met him on the street by chance, and he knew Ivan Ostafiychuk, and I heard of him because my cousin had gone to Ukraine the year before, and I heard of this artist, and he took me to his studio. And Ivan Ostafiychuk, I was 17, he was like 27. And so here was an artist in this cool studio, and he was cool. I immediately, thought that we had a connection. And he was an artist, and I wanted to be an artist. So we hit it off like a house on fire. We were going to be best friends, and we were going to be pen pals. And we were going to, he was a Husar, and he taught me how to toast in po Husarski, vypijemo še raz, or something. And it was, I felt an immediate connection. So when I went back, we started writing, and we started writing just as pen pals. For now.
Thank you. We'll let Natalka rest, and maybe Natalia Khanenko-Friesen can contextualize these letters. She studies letters as family communication, as a particular verbal medium that allows people to maintain contact, maintain their identity, often across ocean. So perhaps you could situate this book in the context of the late 60s and 70s. And so perhaps you would contribute to this.
Thank you very much, and my apologies for first asking Natalka and Lydia to reflect on the book, because I feel I have come into this picture a bit later. It's true. I have spent some time looking and studying family correspondence, which you all have maintained, I'm sure, with your family back in Ukraine. What went into these letters usually would include, reflections on how the family would celebrate Christmas. Maybe a letter would go around Easter. Parcels will be sent. Thank yous will be received. And that correspondence kept going for the entire duration of 20th century, and maybe, of course, it started with the immigration itself. And something had happened, of course, to the letter writing throughout the 20th century with the arrival of Soviet Union, with the oversight which, the security services of Soviet Union were exercising over personal connections which people tried to maintain between the two sides of that, global Ukrainian community or global Ukrainian culture. And then when I was publishing my monograph, I needed a cover for my book, and I really wanted to have a painting or an art piece depicting the actual letter. And this is how I've met Natalka. I have reached out to Natalka because she had this fantastic body of work, the ceramic work, the ceramics you worked in, also included a couple of those very amazing pieces, to me at least. One was a letter sticking out of the envelope, and the other one was a parcel itself, which also had some reference to hustkas exchanged. So we met, we talked, and I got to reflect a little bit more with you, Natalka, on the meaning of correspondence. But then fast forward to 2010, and maybe a bit later for me, when Lykhach reaches out to me and tells me, we have another batch of letters, which in this case were exchanged between, those two famous people, Ivan Ostafiychuk, Natalka Husar, and I was very interested in that correspondence. And of course, the correspondence between Natalka Husar and Ivan Ostafiychuk had nothing to do with what I was used to. You know, it's what Natalka was saying. You know, you go to Ukraine, you encounter the family there, the food, the songs, the sit-downs, the exchanges, the rituals may be familiar, but that connection which you were trying to maintain with Ivan over the course of your letters, of course, would not be present in family letters. So that had intrigued me, and that made me that, I don't know, third leg, or fifth leg, or 17th leg to that very team of trying to figure out how to publish this amazing, amazing artwork, / letters, / personal confessions, which both artists have been exchanging in very intimate way, / correspondence, which meant to cater certain and convincing narrative to the security services, KGB, which also, of course, was very intimately monitoring those letters. And Taras, you were asking me a very important question, how to situate this letter writing in history. Ivan Ostafiychuk, being as powerful as an artist as he had been, was very much monitored by the KGB, by the secret services at the time. And what had come to be of these letters, they were meant to help him to get out of the Soviet Union. Natalka Husar, on the other hand, you know, younger and just sort of rebellious spirit of, we all know the spirit of Natalka Husar, don't we? Nothing, when you think Natalka Husar, nothing fits into the traditional mold of what is Ukrainian culture is to be like in Canada or United States. It ain't Ukrainian Canadian culture, it's Natalka Husar Ukrainian culture. So you can't possibly even imagine, or at least I thought, how would that be that these two would correspond? So what we have here in this book is basically clash, if you wish, a meeting point, an intersection of absolutely different opposing versions of Ukrainianness, dictated by different historical circumstances, but all bound and all married in this one big important mesh of who we are as Ukrainians, whether we live in former Soviet Union, whether we live and work in Canada. This meeting point is all unique for each and every of us, and this particular book is a major display of what these two artists were trying to weave into this meeting point between the two realities of Ukrainianness as they were lived at the time. We have a young, rebellious, can I call you feminist at the time? A young, rebellious, upcoming artist who is aspiring to be as revolutionary when it comes to femininity, as revolutionary when it comes to being, of course, Ukrainian Canadian art. And then on the other hand, we have an established Ukrainian artist living in Ukraine who is being, you know, under the surveillance, who is also traditional male, who is also trying to imagine and write these letters in particular ways to imagine that sort of a partnership, future partnership of theirs in very traditional terms. So what is this meeting point then? That they're all proposing and advocating for different versions, or at least we know Natalka was growing to become who she had become. And then Ivan, of course, had grown to become who had become. But the letters themselves, if you pick up the book and we'll begin reading them, are going to create this absolutely unique universe of a conflation, of sort of explosion of both two versions, trying to, at the same time, convince the agency, the KGB, that those two are in love. I know the story goes deeper, and Natalka is very ready to take over and tell me I'm wrong.
Well, it's not that you're wrong, it's that we have to backtrack a little bit. I said that we were pen pals. And I was 17, and I wasn't an artist yet. And here I met somebody who is an artist, already an established artist, a graphic artist, and he's a Ukrainian, like he's a real Ukrainian, not like the Ukrainians that I was dating, you know, in North America. So there was this absolute fascination. And initially, it was just, well, even from the start, I was very impressed that he was an artist, and I was corresponding with an artist, and we could talk about something, like we could talk about paints. You know, he loved magic markers, and I could get magic markers. I would send him, you know, a marker in every color. He would write back, he would draw, you know, apples, and then I would draw him compote from those apples. And so because we knew nothing about each other, we could invent a kind of world, I guess a visual world. But it was about 3 years of this correspondence, and then something changed. And what changed is actually Tanya van der Heijden, who is in the crowd here today, who's a friend of my brother's, went to Ukraine and met with Ivan Ostafiychuk, and he said that he wanted to get out, like he would like to escape. And a perfect way to escape would be to marry, to escape. And I was the perfect candidate because we were already corresponding, and I was the right age, and I was an artist, or artist wannabe. So I was good. Like, so when she came back, she told me the plan, and in a nanosecond, we just changed. We changed from writing like Doroha, Dorohi Ivan Kuzdorulu. We started writing like, his letters changed to me. Doroha, Люба, кохана, без тебе не можу жити, чекаю, не терпляще на тебе. And he started illustrating how it will be, like when we get married and we'll have a wedding and we're going to ride and these horses, and so we could live in this fantasy. And one of these images, actually that's on the screen, was this sign that I saw once driving to New Jersey, Land of Make-Believe. I love make-believe, so this was just great. It was right up my alley. And I think it was right up his alley too, somehow. Somehow we got into it. And but it wasn't real love, it was sort of fake love, but it was kind of like you don't know what's real or it isn't when you're writing to somebody who's somewhere that you know will never come or you think will never come. You always can say, come closer. You know, it's easier to live in that kind of imaginary world. So that's what happened. The letters became very hot and heavy and juicy. And, but you know, I don't think they convinced anybody, really. They didn't convince the authorities.
So as you can see, we have this lively exchange between myself, Lydia, and Natalka, because behind the scenes, there has been always intense conversations about how to make this story, the actual story, come together for readers to want to read it and for designers to put it all together. So when Lydia approached me and Natalka approached me to start thinking about how maybe we can, you know, create a narrative describing this correspondence, I was really puzzled by what exactly I can say and what is it that I can comment on when it comes to publishing these fantastically artistically executed letters sent by one artist in the 70s to the other artist, one from Canada, one from Ukraine, and they kept exchanging of those. The book only contains Ivan's letters. And I've read them all, and I have known Natalka for a while. I've interviewed you for a couple of other occasions for the book. And it's not until I went back to Ukraine, I think it was 2019, I don't remember anymore, when was it, that I insisted that I need to meet Ivan and I need to have his story told, because I understood there would be many more versions of this story depending on an angle, depending on who's telling it. And when I spent time with Ivan in Lviv, it dawned upon me that this was not the correspondence between the two people. This was a correspondence between three parties. Yes, on one side we have a writer in Ukraine, artist in Ukraine. On the other side, we do have a fantastic artist in Canada who are trying to do something. And what they're trying to do, they're trying to write and appeal and appease and please and convince a third party to these letters. And that was a eureka moment for me. I've come back to the letters. I went to rereading them, I started rereading them again. And if you flip through this book, you will find these particular letters where you can see how the design itself, the narrative itself, even in Ivan's letters, are executed in such a way as to talk to KGB. In fact, my interview with Ivan was all about him going every month to his monthly meetings with the colonel, the polkovnik of KGB, who was asking him about his whereabouts, his work with, his encounters with artists from the West. He was well connected, as you know. And Ivan was very elusive. He had actually his KGB code name was elusive. So that's exactly what he was known to, or that's how he was referenced in the documentation in KGB archives, which are not accessible anymore because that was all burned. But Ivan was in this sort of a conundrum, in this sort of a predicament of trying to maintain this correspondence with Natalka, this spirit of freedom. We're all talking about 70s, and the 60s were the revolutionary time for so many, right? That spirit of freedom, liberation, that was the word of the several decades. The colonial systems had been collapsing. The equality movements have been taking the world by mouths. And he was in Ukraine, he was in Soviet Ukraine, going to see his KGB agent every month and not feeling that freedom he was really, really longing for. So for him, these letters were the exit, the window. And ultimately, having spoken to him and having spent the entire exchange, time we've spent together, listening to his stories, how he was called and how he was summoned to KGB agent, given an idea, this is not just the story about the two artists, it is a story of a generation. It is a story of you, those who are representing the, maybe you're children of DP generation, maybe you are the offspring of that particular immigration wave which has come here to North America with that very longing for freedom, with this sort of assumed, this diasporic saudade, Ukrainian style for freedom, that sort of elevated sense of injustice which we in the diaspora, in the community in North America are all feeling, especially after 2022 with another war being launched by the Russian Federation on Ukraine. So those letters have come to be a story of so many stories rather than one. It's a story of a generation, it's a story of disconnect, it's a story of displacement, of pain, of longing, of wanting to find your own Ukrainian other, right? So for Natalka, going and meeting Ivan was longing for Ukrainian other in Ukraine. For Ivan, writing to Natalka was imagining what it is like to be Ukrainian but not constrained by the KGB visits. So,
what's interesting about this book and this story is that, in a bookstore, you wouldn't know where to place it. It's not an art book. It's not a history book. It's not a political book. It's not a love story. It's fiction, and it's not fiction. So it's hard to pinpoint because for me, I played along because it's very easy to play along when you live here. I couldn't even imagine that Ivan went to the KGB. I couldn't even imagine what that boogeyman looked like. And I didn't really think of it because I was naive, young, free-spirited, and I was, the correspondence was about 8 years. And those are very formative years. They started when I was 17 till I was, 20-something. So I was growing during that time. I was growing as an artist. I was growing as a woman. Feminism was something that Ivan Ostafiychuk never heard of then. So it was, it's fascinating. Life is amazing. So.
Thank you. I'm also curious, the fact that KGB, the imperial eye, the Soviet eye, is hovering over everything an artist or writer does, it's nothing new, right? Writers in Ukraine, artists in Ukraine faced it every day. And it's basically, they had to invent ways of saying things between the lines or coming up with ways where they could just be themselves, because the imperial eye basically demands a particular type of performance. If you're a poet, you have to start your collection with a poem on October Revolution or the last, whatever, Lenin, whatever myth or something. And then you can write something else, maybe a landscape, maybe a love poem. But it's the expected performance that the authorities were monitoring. And it is quite fast. So I wouldn't discard letters as inauthentic or false, or even the word fictional. It's not a negative sense fictional. It's a productive way of overcoming this restriction that tries to cage you. And even if Ivan was inventing his feelings, I think there is something quite beautiful in it, because he just let himself go there, even if it's imaginative. And that's how he acquired freedom. And it's also marvelous how these letters, again, it's impossible to pin them down. These are some kind of multimedia, if I were looking for a fancy word. But you really, the book gives you this opportunity to sense the layers of what's in the text, what's being surveilled, and what is being said between the lines. And then I think the intimacy or the emotional connection, the fondness is in the visual shape, in the actual material of the book, in these illustrations, because they're not sanctioned. They're just outpourings of imagination, of some impulse of an artist to connect with his correspondent. So it gives us insight into both the cage, the restriction, but also the paths to free oneself from those cages and restrictions, perhaps.
Or to camouflage.
And camouflage. Mimicry and camouflage are one of the most common devices of survival for people who live under the eye of the Big Brother. And those of us who remember some decades of Soviet Union, it's quite familiar. Starting from KGB, sort of ubiquitous, you go to university and you hear stories. In the bathrooms, there are bugs, so beware what you say there. And you just live with that and learn how to push it aside and somehow find your own ways of being authentic with yourself. Natalia?
If I can say a few words, right? Thank you, Taras. I'm very happy you brought up the idea of performativity, the performance, because to me as a scholar, that is definitely the way to position and understand this correspondence as a performing act. something you don't see in, you know, private family letters exchanged between regular folk here and there. So this is a very different kind of correspondence. And in terms of surveillance and in terms of strategies of covering up the real course of event, this is a very important question even scholars are considering when looking at letters across different sort of domains and different communities. KGB, for example, first of all, the surveillance of letters, the censorship of letters was omnipresent. Every single letter which had come to the Soviet Union was subject to the scrutiny of the KGB agents. They were all classified, characterized, sorted out. Some were retained, looked at more carefully. Some were never returned, some were returned. And I'm sure many of you may have reflected on that sort of a imposition of KGB on your own personal letters you may have exchanged with families back in Soviet times. I remember reading the files in the KGB archives stating that, you know, immediately after the World War II, for example, again, time frames, right, when many have been coming to DP camps, eventually to North America, there were millions of letters looked at per month. It's staggering. The statistics are staggering. There were also manuals developed by the agency, which discussed and described those strategies the agents would be looking for in order to identify the messaging and how they were coded. They're elaborate, and we can have a different session and panel just on that topic to discuss it. But in case of Natalka's correspondence with Ivan, I wonder if you would like to say a few words about how it all came to an end. What sort of coding language was used to make letters slow down?
Even though this was fictive, it wasn't fake. And by that I mean, we wrote about 580 letters. So it's a commitment to a correspondence, you know, and even though I never really thought that he would come, but, though it was a strong possibility at one point. I remember one day I got a letter that said, "I don't love you anymore." I found somebody else, and we have to part. And even though it was fictive, and I really would be in trouble if he actually did love me and did come, I remember being very heartbroken, you know, because I was invested in this tale. And it wasn't fake, because I really enjoyed corresponding with him. You know, it was but I wrote back I didn't write back for a while, and then I wrote back, like, 2 months later, and said the reason why I didn't write back was because there was a postal strike, which was true. And in this book is the last letter. He did save the last letter that I wrote, and that's what I say in it. So, and then of course I said that, you know, I understand, and we're still, you know, we'll still be friends. You know, we're going to still look at, follow each other's careers, and I wish you, you know, I wish you a good life. No, I wish you happiness with your new partner. And then at the very same time in that letter I say, and it's so weird that I'm writing you this, I wish you, you know, happiness with your new partner. So I was kind of myself, and then jumping out of myself. I was reflective and honest to him to the very end. And that's what I would say was interesting about this correspondence, that I was writing to somebody in a place that was so far away, like, you know, Ukraine was the other world. And we didn't really have anything really in common, but we only knew each other for 2 hours and corresponded for 8 but it felt very natural, right? It was a kinship. So, but at the same time, I was growing. By this time, by 8 years, I was growing as an artist, and I was already on a path very different, very consciously different than the path that he was taking. So,
Can I come back to performance and coding? So while Natalka is receiving these letters from Ivan, where they are wrapping up their 8-year-long love affair, at the same time, Ivan continues going to the KGB polkovnik, colonel. And in some point, I remember he was reflecting on this exchange, one of the most, latest exchanges between himself and the KGB agent, polkovnik. And the KGB agent was laughing into his face when Ivan was hiding the fact that he's trying to leave the country. And the KGB agent tells him, "Don't you know what I know? You're not going anywhere." So there was, on the other side, that was the experience of not being let out. And the wording which you have received was a code for "I'm not allowed to leave."
No, for sure, I knew that. I didn't take it truly to heart, but I was heartbroken, as everybody here would be. But should I tell them what happened with my letters?
Yes.
So listen to this. This is crazy. I met Ivan at the book launch. We did this in Lviv in the end of May this year. And somebody in the audience asked, well, where's Natalka's letters? And I say, of course, yeah. I mean, I kept every single letter, and he says, well, when he had to move, and when he finally did go to Croatia, he had to pack up his studio, and he gave the letters to a friend, a sculptor friend, Motika. And that friend recently died. He died in February. And he doesn't know what happened to the letters, but he gave them to a friend. And I sort of secretly thought, sure, likely story. Like, you throw them out, you didn't save them. But nothing, that's what we were told. Then I think it was a friend that was with him, and there was a doctor friend at this launch, and he sort of got very interested in this idea, and he knew this sculptor Motika, and he was going to investigate. And he went to his wife, or his daughter, not Motika's daughter, and he told her the story that this book came out, and there's Natalka's letters, and he gave them these letters some 40 years ago. Your father gave these letters. And she said, bad timing, because I cleaned out the studio. There was so much stuff. Sculptors, they're worse than painters. They keep all these molds and everything, and, love letters of friends. And everything, there was so much garbage that, the city wouldn't pick it up. She had to hire a driver to take it to this biggest dump site outside of Lviv. But it was yesterday or something. And so it's, the letters are gone. Well, this doctor gets the phone number of the driver and goes with the driver to this garbage heap, which is apparently vast. And he knew where he dumped these letters, these boxes. I mean, many boxes of stuff. And you won't believe it, but lo and behold, they found a box. It was there. Somewhere there's an image of it. And when they tore open the box, they were my letters. So, So it really, the story and the book has a life of its own, and it has legs of its own. So I don't know what's going to happen next.
Мені захотілося додати два слова, що Родовід уже там майже 30 років або 30 років друкує всі такі книжки, що мають свою місію. Василь Кричевський, Федір Кричевський, 4 роки вже робимо, Малевич, Екстер, український модернізм. Це все треба зробити, бо не зроблено до цього часу. І ми це робимо. А ця книжка нарешті була така, знаєте, щось таке дуже, щось зовсім інше, таке вже 1/18 такого, що треба чи не треба робити. Але вона просто фантастична, бо мені довелося відбирати листи, бо листів було понад 500, а до книжки війшло, там, скажімо, 100 або трошки більше. І коли мені довелося її читати кілька разів, і я не могла зрозуміти в кожному листі: я тебе люблю, я тебе приїду, ми їздили до моря. Майже одне й те саме в кожному листі, бо це все було і листування, і щоб КГБ бачило, що він дуже свою наречену так дуже любить, і треба дати візу, зрештою не дали візу. Але що листи дуже читаються. Ти відчуваєш, що в них багато, крім цих чарівних малюнків, дуже-дуже багато такої якоїсь енергії. Тобто, як каже Наталка, це не було фейк, це було дуже... одним словом, що це читається як нова українська мистецтвознавча література. Це не як листування, це просто і цікаво дуже бачити, чим жили в той час львівські митці. І справді він дуже був близький, його перша дружина була музикант, але вона поїхала, здається, до Мінська, ще там 60-ті роки, ще без Наталки було діло. І вона така відома була музикант у Львові, і вони розлучилися, вона поїхала працювати до Мінська, але він не поїхав. Але вже видно, і тоді, і пізніше вони дуже часто ходять на такі гарні музичні концерти, гарні такі різдвяні. Одним словом, що там дуже багато контексту, крім того, звичайно, страху, що він мав, бо коли КГБ тебе кличе кожен місяць, я це дуже добре знаю також, то це неприємне, але в книжці немає того страху, а є та молодість, та прекрасна той контекст 70-х років. І мені здається, дякую, Наталко, що ти потрапила в таку історію і зберегла листи, зберегла історію нам. Так що ми тобі дуже вдячні. І мені було дуже-дуже приємно працювати над тою книжкою. І як і Іра Пасічник, дизайнерка, котра разом з Наталкою робила ту книжку, вони нам так можуть подзвонитися в 8 вечора і говорити до 8 ранку. І кожну деталь, от там.
Everybody who came and listened to this tale. And I was trying to find this CIUS, this writer in Ukraine, wrote me, who I met, we did this launch in Kyiv, and then he wrote me back, he wrote me a letter saying how fantastic it was the story of this book. And he said, what's interesting about it also is that it touches on the subject of what is love, and when it's real, and when it's fake, or when it's pretended, and when it's convincingly pretended. And that's such a big question, that it's somehow that it can be when it's not 100%, but it's there, Anyway, it's just a fascinating thought. Дякую. Thank you so much. Thank you.